Look, let's be incredibly real for a second. You probably have 50-something apps rotting on your home screen right now. You've got a dozen streaming platforms with basically infinite content, a playlist for literally every conceivable mood, a feed for every hyper-specific niche obsession you've ever had, and yet, you are still dying of boredom. It's wild, right? You've all this main character energy and literally no place to put it because absolutely nothing is hitting the spot. You're just doomscrolling. Welcome to This Explainer, where we're going to dive deep into a mystery that completely breaks the matrix of human history. If you're ready to get locked in and have your entire perspective shifted, hit follow on Inner Drive right now because we drop explainers that hit this hard all the time. Okay, let's dive into this. We're talking about the cradle of boredom and why doing absolutely nothing is actually the biggest flex in human evolution.
So here is the ultimate rhetorical question that literally nobody ever thinks to ask. What did our ancient ancestors actually do when the vibes were at zero? And I am not talking about medieval peasants churning butter, or even the guys building the pyramids. We need to go way, way further back. I'm talking 100,000, maybe 200,000 years into the deep, deep past. Picture it. Writing, art, and music didn't even exist yet. It was just a bunch of early humans sitting around in the dirt with absolutely nothing to occupy their brains. No screens, no books, no wheels. Just pure, unadulterated, deafening silence. The answer to what they did with that massive void of time actually shatters everything you think you know about creativity, society, and exactly why your brain feels like a fried circuit board today.
Chapter 1. The Survival Myth.
For decades, scientists operated on this massive, totally unchallenged assumption. They basically assumed our ancestors were in a 24/7, high-stress, sweaty survival mode. Like they were constantly hunting, constantly gathering berries, or literally sprinting away so a leopard didn't turn them into a midnight snack. They figured early humans had zero downtime. But that assumption was hilariously, scientifically wrong. Enter anthropologist Marshall Sahlins. Back in 1966, Sahlins dropped a game-changing research paper that completely flipped the table on early human history. He spent years actually vibing with the Kung people in the Kalahari Desert who were living that original prehistoric human lifestyle. Sahlins labeled them the original affluent society. Now, when we say affluent, we usually mean rich in money or crypto or designer stuff, but Sahlins meant they were rich in the one thing modern society is completely starving for right now: free time.
Chapter 2. The 15-hour work week. When Sahlins actually ran the numbers and tracked the daily routines of the Kong people, he found a massive glitch in the matrix. We have been so conditioned to think that before the modern era, ancient life was an endless, back-breaking grind just to secure the next meal. But the math says otherwise. 15 to 20 hours. And let me make this crystal clear for you. That is not a daily shift. That is their weekly total. 15 to 20 hours per week. No cap, they had way more free hours than any stressed-out corporate drone sitting in a cubicle today. So what did they do with the rest of the time? They just hung out. They chatted, they took naps, they literally just stared out at the horizon. So the real mystery isn't whether our ancestors got bored. The absolute biggest mystery is what they did with that massive, gaping void of unstructured time.
Chapter 3. The Idle Hands Hypothesis. Think about it. When you have hours and hours of downtime, zero chores, and no immediate survival threats bearing down on you, your brain starts desperately looking for ways to entertain itself. This idle playtime became the literal incubator for human expression. Back in 2010, an archaeologist named Francesco D'Erico analyzed some shells from Blombos Cave down in South Africa. These things were 75,000 years old, complete with tiny, precise holes drilled through them and coated in red ochre pigment. These weren't tools, they weren't food containers, they were beads. Somebody, 75,000 years ago, got so unbelievably tired of staring at the blank cave wall that they sat down and made jewelry. Just think about the intense, dusty, mind-numbing grind of drilling through a thick seashell using nothing but a sharp rock, just hours of pure, relentless repetition. They did it because sitting in silence was agonizing. Boredom literally invented the very first art.
Chapter 4. The Sound of Silence.
And we see the exact same pattern show up with music. In 2008, researchers excavating a cave in southern Germany found a 40,000-year-old flute carved out of a vulture bone. It had perfectly placed finger holes for playing scales. Someone, way before cities or farms or anything resembling civilization even existed, decided to just invent sound. Not out of necessity, not to survive, but because they had a free afternoon and a random bird bone lying around. As neuroscientist Daniel Levitin puts it, rhythm is pattern recognition, and pattern recognition kept us alive. Our brains were vibrating with rhythm and melody way, way before we had complex sentences.
Music is what happens when the human brain has zero external data to process. When you starve the brain of input, it falls back on its primal programming. We were hardwired for the beat to survive predators, sure, but when the predators were gone and the cave was perfectly quiet, the brain kept making patterns purely for the vibes.
Chapter 5. The Leap to Imagination.
Here's a crazy thought. You can't actually feel bored unless you understand that time is dragging on. You have to realize that the future exists, and that the future could theoretically be vastly better than right now. Animals don't really do this. Your dog isn't having an existential crisis waiting for you to come home from work. He's just existing entirely in the present moment. But a human sitting by a roaring fire 100,000 years ago, staring into the flames with absolutely nothing to do, starts letting their mind totally drift. They start asking massive, world-altering rhetorical questions. What if the hunt fails tomorrow? What's on the other side of that giant ridge? Where do our friends go when the lights go out? Boredom is the very first evidence of a brain simulating things that do not exist yet. Every complex philosophy, every religion, every scientific breakthrough started exactly the same way. A bored person letting their mind wander out into the unknown.
Chapter 6. The Brain as a Content Creator. To prove this ancient mechanism still works in our modern world, this brilliant psychologist, Sandy Mann, set up a lab experiment back in 2013. She took two groups of people. One group had normal, constant stimulation. The other group? She made them do the most soul-crushing, agonizingly boring task imaginable, copying numbers out of a physical phone book by hand. Then, she tested both groups for creativity. And guess what? The bored group absolutely crushed everyone else. No cap, it wasn't even close. Why? Because when you completely starve the brain of input, it goes into overdrive. A starved brain becomes a natural content creator. It forcefully generates its own ideas and its own stimulation just to fill the void. The brain desperately needs the empty room to actually work its magic.
Chapter 7. The Social Glue of Gossip.
Now, there is one final, incredibly crucial way our ancestors killed the silence. They spilled tea. They shared the prehistoric equivalent of dramatic subtweets. They engaged in pure, unfiltered gossip. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar actually ran the numbers and found that roughly 65% of all human conversation is just social gossip. Who is dating who is a liar, who thinks they should be the leader. Modern society always tells us gossip is trashy behavior, right? But Dunbar frames it totally differently. This wasn't a waste of time. This was the foundational technology of human civilization. Gossip was the social glue that kept our ancestors from literally tearing each other apart. Chapter 8. From Grooming to Group Chats. Dunbar argues that language didn't actually evolve for practical, logistical communication. We didn't invent words just to yell, "Throw the spear right now!" Language evolves primarily for social bonding. Think about it. Before language, primates bonded by physical grooming, literally sitting there picking bugs out of each other's hair. It builds massive trust, sure, but it is incredibly slow and strictly one-to-one. You can only groom one bestie at a time. Language completely replaced physical grooming. Suddenly, with verbal gossip, you have one-to-many bonding. You could bond with 10 people at once just sitting around a fire. You could warn your friends about who to trust and who to avoid without having to learn the hard way. Boredom literally invented the rumor, and rumors allowed us to build global trust networks. Gossip, as crazy as it sounds, invented society.
Chapter 9. The Modern Cognitive Overload.
So here is the absolute kicker. We spent 300,000 years using pure silence to invent art, to discover music, and to form massive, complex societies. But now, right now, in the smartphone era, we are actively preventing ourselves from ever experiencing that void again. And it's leading to what psychologists call cognitive overload. When every single moment of your day is stimulated by a feed, your brain never gets to process, it never gets to consolidate, and it never creates. You actively suppress the default mode network. That's the part of your brain that acts as the ultimate engine for creativity, deep empathy, and profound self-reflection. And here's the craziest part. It only activates when you are bored. Every single time you reach for your phone the second you feel a lull, you are literally shutting down the most powerful creative engine inside your skull. Boredom didn't hold our ancestors back. It is literally what made them human. And today, it might be the absolute only thing that saves you from becoming a mindless zombie in the digital age. So I'm going to leave you with this. What if the next massive breakthrough in your life is just waiting on the other side of putting your phone down? Thank you for diving into this explainer with me. If this shifted your perspective even a little bit, hit follow on the Inner Drive channel right now. Stay locked in, stay curious, and I'll catch you in the next one.